Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Gavin Wood and I'm CEO of CyberLab. Thanks all for joining us today. I'm really excited for this webinar presenting our newest technology partner, Island Enterprise Browser. But before we jump into the meat of the webinar and I introduce our speakers, I thought it'd be worth giving a quick history of the browser itself. So the first web browser was called World Wide Web, created by the very famous Sir Tim Berners-Lee in 1990. And 3 years later, the Mosaic web browser was released in April 1993. The latter being credited for being the first web browser to find mainstream popularity. Its graphical user interface made what was then known as the World Wide Web easy to navigate and more accessible to the average person, in turn giving rise to the internet boom of the 90s. The lead developers of Mosaic went on to found the Netscape Corporation, which released Netscape Navigator in 1994, which quickly became the most popular browser. Microsoft debuted Internet Explorer in 1995, and that led to what became known as the browser wars. Within a few years, Microsoft gained a dominant position in the browser market as they'd actually bundled Internet Explorer free to use with the Windows operating system and no restrictions on its usage. And the market share of Internet Explorer peaked at over 95% in the early 2000s. In 1998, Netscape launched what would become the Mozilla Foundation to create a new browser using an open source software model. And that became what is now known as the Firefox browser, first released in 2004. Meanwhile, Apple released its Safari browser in 2003 and remains a dominant browser on Apple devices, but has not become popular outside of that ecosystem. Google released its Chrome browser in 2008 and immediately started taking market share from Internet Explorer and became the most popular browser by 2012, and Chrome has remained dominant ever since. The Chromium source code was also made available, allowing new browser builds to be constructed from it, such as Opera or DuckDuckGo. By 2015, Microsoft replaced Internet Explorer with Edge for the Windows 10 release, but it's also worth noting that that was also built on the Chromium source. So the internet browser has been around for about 34 years in various flavors, and I'm sure you all have your own preference, and I know I do. But browsers have become a ubiquitous and essential piece of business technology, not just enabling businesses to allow users to browse the internet, but also responsible for delivering a wide range of services. From browsing the web to accessing your CRM or even managing your infrastructure as a service data center, the browser has become a key component of your security infrastructure. So designed to meet the diverse needs of organizations, the Island Enterprise Browser reimagines what a web browser can do for your organization's security, productivity, and cost efficiency. I'm genuinely excited to announce this great partnership with Island and Island's Enterprise Browser. Today, joining me on this webinar, we have Ashley Brinsford, Head of EMEA Sales at Island, and we've got Matt Smith, Island Security Engineer. The Q&A panel is open for questions, so feel free to add any as we go through this webinar. So, gents, thanks for joining us today. I'll hand over to you, Ash, to carry on with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Gavin, and just hearing you there, I don't know, just makes me feel old. I was, when you were talking about Netscape and the like, I was thinking about the days of ICQ and LimeWire and Napster and dial-up modems and IBM 486s and Pentiums and the whole shooting match. So yeah, definitely thank you for that. Took a bit of a trip down memory lane there. But you're absolutely right. The web browsers has taken on a hell of a journey with all of us here today on the phone over the years, a hell of a journey. And this is the latest kind of fork in the road. So what is Island and where have we come from? We've gone from, as Gavin said, that entire history to now all of the major browser providers standardizing on the Chromium open source framework. Gavin alluded to that. It's 34 million lines of code and growing, second largest open source project in the world behind Linux. And that's where the modern day browsers are centered upon. But here's the thing. The browser at its genesis is a consumer device. It's an application designed for the advertisers, designed for the 5 billion consumers that it governs. It's not been designed for the needs of the enterprise in mind. It sits very much as a standalone piece, a very critical piece of the enterprise architecture and application stack. What happens, and we'd have all seen this on the call, and certainly Gavin and the team have probably sold a whole heap of this technology over the years. I've certainly been involved in some of the biggest deployments globally in these areas. But what happens is we bring this consumer application into the enterprise. It's a central piece, and we have to treat it like a bit of a caged animal. We have to apply agents and speed humps and backhauls just to give it the assurance and the compliance and the security that it needs to operate. So what do? We end up backhauling this traffic and putting it through a web proxy in the cloud. We end up having to apply things like other controls, like browser isolation controls and sandboxing and CASBs and DLPs all around the edges of the browser itself. And then when we've got remote workers or contractors or third parties, we end up having to say, hey, we need a VPN technology on that device to then backhaul to a data center somewhere and then access these 4 or 5 applications, these browser-based applications via a VDI type system. All of this adding layers and layers and layers of complexity, layers of cost to the business, and most importantly, impacting our end users. Hands up who last enjoyed their last Citrix VDI experience, as an example. That is the way of the world right now, though. Until now, and this is what Island has set about. So Island has set about delivering a browser that is based on the same exact look and feel as Chrome or Edge and Opera and Brave, but a browser that's built for the needs of the enterprise, that puts you in control, that gives it that element of security, visibility, and control, but also with productivity features, enhancements that just wasn't possible before now. So the exact same browser, the exact same experience, the same way it renders, how extensions can run, how processes run, everything is the same as what you'd see today. But what Island has done is it's focused on the right-hand side of this slide. We've built true enterprise requirements in. At the very genesis of this, we've built an enterprise trust model where the browser now plays a cooperative role in the enterprise, and it knows the device I'm on. It knows where I'm geolocated in the world. It knows that it's me, Ash Brinsford, logging into it, and where I should have access to and what I should have access to. It's now playing a very collaborative role to deliver key features then, like I can see this type of data in Salesforce. I can't see that type. I'm in Germany maybe now. I can see German data in Germany, but not the minute I step outside of the confines of Germany and end up in the UK or in the US, as an example. Things like last mile control, that's a really key part of Island. Our ability to apply this last mile control with full dexterity. What do I mean by that? Items like cut, copy, paste, upload, download, screenshot protection even, watermarking, governing how I print, where I print to. The whole 9 yards now is now controllable at the browser level itself. It's not a block or allow, it's done with absolute dexterity, and Matt's going to show you that today in the demonstration. And then look, this is how Islands show up to organizations. We can show up as the enterprise browser itself, and give you a massive upgrade on the consumer browser you're using today. Or more commonly, we turn up for a use case that maybe before has been impossible to govern or to crack. Things like critical SaaS and web apps. With that last mile control that I talked about, giving you full governance, full assurance that no data could leave a really critical business application. Let's take Salesforce as an example. One of the most commonly used apps out there, full of customer data. How do I have complete assurance that no data can leave that application and drip onto the desktop or be sent via email or anywhere else, dropped into a file sharing technology? Now, with the ability to control and own the browser, and therefore the application itself, you've got full control of that data flow. Take it a step forward. Contractors, BYOD, what I call the edge of the network, those devices that it's so difficult to impart your will on, those devices that you can't put an agent on, the iPads out there, the contractors' devices, the students logging in, whatever it is, very, very difficult to assert our will until now. Now it's a case of downloading that Island browser and having that user on a device that your corporation doesn't own, log in via that browser, now I've got full control, full visibility, and full assurance on a device that I previously didn't own. That unmanaged device now becomes almost semi-managed, and it's just because now I've got control of the browser. Matt's gonna show you that in action. And then it wouldn't be a great idea without great business benefit. The cost savings of this are phenomenal. You've got the cost consolidation play of various tools. Matt and I just came off a call literally this morning in Australia where an organization was looking at 5 different tool areas that now they could look at just having in the browser itself, all the way through to massive cost savings around VPN infrastructure and Citrix infrastructure, desktop as a service VDI. What we found, especially with the pandemic, is a lot of organizations, quite rightfully, had to rush to put stuff onto Citrix and VDI to allow users to come in from remote locations in a safe and secure manner. Now organizations are putting their head above the parapet a bit and looking at it from an architectural standpoint for the future, not for the past. And now we're finding that a lot of those applications could be protected, controlled, rendered, and experienced through a modern day browser rather than a Citrix backhaul. Rather than waiting the 1 minute to load up, I've now got a pure and fluid browser experience to access those applications. So look, just a bit of a whistle-stop tour there from the problem statement to how the enterprise browser came about to also how we tend to show up in an organization in the first instance by way of use cases. You've got the Island Enterprise browser, but we've also got a couple of other modalities as well. We have an extension. So for some organizations that say, hey, look, it's kind of difficult to change the user's experience. We want them to stay on Edge and Chrome. We can offer this same capability by way of the Island extension. Just drops onto Chrome and Edge and gives you that last mile control that we've talked about and that what Matt will show you. And also our mobile devices, so iOS and Android and Chromebook, all fully supported as well. So different modalities, many different use cases, and now I'll hand over to Matt to show you where the rubber really meets the road and actually show you the thing in action.
Right, thanks, Ash. Gavin, can I have share mode? There we go. Great. So thanks for the intro to Island, Ash. My job is now to bring it to life a bit, show you the browser, show you the experience, and really focus on some of those key use cases. Where we start with Island is this idea that we might have an unmanaged world, we might have a managed world, but I need to get Island on the device. So you can see here, part of our onboarding process is for the user to download Island on their own device. Here I've just gone to the Island download site. This is protected by the identity of the user, so you can't just download our browser. But once you've authenticated, you can choose whichever device you're on to access the applications that you need to. Google app, iOS, Mac, Linux, and the like. What we've also done is provided some insight to the user on what the browser will look like. Very specifically for the webinar, we've branded this the CyberLab browser. So you'll start to see some of that user experience, but also that branding come into play. So the idea is the user downloads Island. You can see it next to Chrome and Edge on my desktop. I fire up the browser. I log in. That gives me my identity. We have integrations with many other IDP providers such as Okta, Entra, Ping, and the list goes on. Now, the idea here is that once I've logged into the browser, I'm actually presented with all the applications that I need to do my job. And if we think back to a traditional scenario where a user might access these apps through Citrix, they might not specifically know where to go. What Island has built is this idea of this single workspace. So now I have all my SaaS applications made available to me. As I scroll down this list, you'll see other modalities. So here are my internal applications. These are applications where traditionally I might need a Citrix or I might need a VPN on my client. I need to somehow get the device to the network without being on the network. This is our zero trust concept
built directly into the browser. A simple way of thinking about this is the browser is now the VPN client intertwined with the access. We've also thought about other scenarios where users need to access applications that might run outside the context of a browser. So here we can deliver a full virtual desktop to the user. We can give access via an SSH client. And with our integration with AVD down the bottom, you see that once I've authenticated into the browser, I can have all of my AVD applications loaded up for me. So wherever I go on whatever device I'm on, as long as I have the Island browser, I have my workspace delivered for me. Now, it is a browser, so it can be used in the same context that Chrome and Edge can be. We have a lot of indicators to the users to help protect their privacy. So here you can see activity is private. I can't monitor anything about what's going on this specific browser or specific destinations. And when we think about the user, we want to think about all the convenience tools that they need to do their job. So in the top right-hand corner here, you'll see some integrated applications such as a password manager, which is an enterprise-grade password manager designed to be secure. Imagine securing and saving all of your critical passwords in a secure browser just makes a very sensible place for that to happen. And again, you can see our ability to connect to different types of services in the browser. An embedded AI assistant to help the user do their job more effectively as well. So that's a bit about the home page. This is a bit about how this user gets this nice experience. Now let's talk about some of the scenarios where we might want to protect our data. We might want to put some DLP controls around some of this access. So I'm going to click on Salesforce. I'm on an unmanaged device. Maybe I'm a BYO user. I'm a contractor. I'm somebody that needs to get access to the CyberLab Salesforce resource. The first thing the browser does is actually does a compliance assessment. So based on policy, you can say, my device needs to have at minimum up-to-date EPP security enabled. It must have disk encryption because I'm going to let you interact with a file upload and download. I want to make sure the device is protected. And actually, I need you to access this from regions that I trust. Now you can see here my device has failed a number of those checks. I'm off the network, I don't have disk encryption, and my AV is out of date. Now ordinarily in most other tools this would be a block access. Sorry, you can't have access to the resource. What we have at Island is the ability to start adding some additional controls to just put some additional checks around the user accessing the application. We don't want to stop them having access to the application. We want to protect the application due to the failure of the device. So the first thing I've done there is I've stepped up MFA. I can do MFA injection on any application out there, whether it's single sign-on or whether it's standalone. But I want to check that the user on this device before accessing Salesforce is who they say they are. And you'll see that Salesforce obviously renders exactly as it would. We're not changing anything about the browser experience for the user. But what I've done very specifically in my policy is say, you're now going to have a limited set of access. I'm going to put some controls in place to prevent data coming out of Salesforce onto the device or finding its way out to any other application that we don't trust. Now, the first thing you'll see is the indicator in the top left that the compliance has failed, and you'll also see this shield to say, hey, the activity is now monitored. End user communication is really key here. They can now understand the context of access. But let's start with a couple of basic tests. So first here, I want to download the finance report. Obviously, because it has failed, I'm going to block access. Hey, you can't have access to the file for these reasons. You'll notice the CyberLab branding will appear everywhere, and that will be consistent across the product, notifying the user about access. Because with the browser, we can also change what we do and change how a user has access. So for example, this finance report, they may need to have access to it. We don't want it to go on the desktop. We don't want them to use local Excel. But what we can do at the point they start to download the file is actually redirect it. And in this case, you can see it's now directed it to the user's OneDrive. So we're taking the file from the application, we're putting it into somewhere we trust for them to access. Again, different ways of treating data on the application. And there's other controls that we've built in where, again, Ash talked about the concept of the last mile, where we want to try and protect the data. So now my ability to print is met with a prompt to say, hey, you're on a non-compliant device. We understand you might need this, but we also need a reason why you want to print this out. not about restricting the user, it's about giving them the flexibility to make the decisions. Down here, as I scroll down, you'll also see that we can perform soft data redaction. Again, on an unmanaged device, on a BYO, maybe a contractor, maybe they shouldn't see the information that's presented in this screen. So here we've redacted anything on the page which relates to credit card. You'll see over here on the left, third column up, again, credit card data was exposed in the application. We want to mask that out. We want to protect the user from seeing that. And again, if I want to get access, I can choose to reveal the information. That's now presented for me, and I can choose to copy that information into my clipboard. That clipboard exists in the top right-hand corner. You'll see it appear there for the user. They can now reuse that in the application. That's a nice convenience tool. What happens now if I open up a new tab, as I ordinarily would, the information has now been redacted in the clipboard. So a scenario might be that I'm trying to move that information into an application that I don't trust. Even if I try and paste that in, you'll see that Island can intercept that information, tell the user that this is an unsanctioned application. Sorry, we don't want you to move that information out. That also allows it to have control over the full desktop. So here you can see that I can't paste it directly onto any application in the desktop. So putting a nice tight boundary around the application, giving user access but preventing data moving out of that application is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to change the way that we think about DLP, or change the way that we implement controls that gives us much more control over the data. In this last example, you'll see sensitive information. We can do redaction on an entire page. Here I can have a QR code, so if someone tries to pick up their camera phone, take a picture of the information, we have attribution, we know who shared the photo. It won't stop them taking a picture, but it will certainly make them think twice. And again, when you think about exporting data, copy, paste, screenshot protection, it's all built into the controls of Island. We can control every facet that the user does when they try and access or exfiltrate this information directly from the browser. Last little thing I'll show you is on the threat protection side, because it's important that not only do we protect the data, we protect the user. So we have inbuilt filtering. If I click on a potential malicious link, you can see that we can block access to that site. CyberLab says, no, you can't go there, it's malicious. Same scenario for things like opening or scanning malicious files, directly blocked in the browser, stops it getting to the endpoint, trying to put as much in the browser as we can possibly. And then last thing I want to show is some really nice controls we have around phishing protection. So here I get a typical, hey, you're about to visit a suspicious site. We can tell the user it's potentially suspicious, but we're saying yes, that they can go to the site if they feel they need to. Now, the moment I try and put in my corporate credentials, you can see here, I'm typing island.io. We understand the context of that domain going into this login page, and then we can prompt the user to say, hey, are you sure you want to put your credentials in here? This is only related to the domain credentials, so I can choose now, if I don't want to use that and use my own personal credentials, that information can go in no problem. They may want to use their own credentials for certain applications. So a nice blend of controlling what we consider important, but still allow the user to have that flexibility. So in summary, that's Island. This is my centralized workspace for my SaaS, my internal applications, anything that needs to be delivered through a remote desktop, and equally anything that needs to be delivered via AVD. Gavin, I'll hand back to you. I'm happy to open for Q&A, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Ash. Really, really useful. So we haven't actually had any questions come in over the channel, but I have got a couple of questions myself, if you don't mind me asking. First of all, you mentioned at the beginning there, Ash, you were on a call with a customer, and they were looking at consolidating 5 tools into the use case that Island would give them. Obviously, not wanting to give away any confidential information about the customer or anything like that, but would you mind just kind of saying kind of what those tools were and why the Island Enterprise Browser was the right fit for that customer? Because I think, again, turning those use cases into how it might be used would be really useful for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a mishmash actually. It was web proxy, it was DLP, and it was privileged access management (PAM). And then there was for the remote users, it was a consolidation of VPN technology and VDI Citrix licensing. So this organization had a requirement to have a young student-based workforce access a few key applications, and they were in the process of going through that. Right, how do I get this couple of hundred users to safe and secure application access? I've got to ship laptops, I've got to apply VPN, and then I've got to put them into a Citrix farm, basically, just to get access to 4 applications that actually, those applications were browser-based apps. They were key mission-critical apps, Gavin, but browser-based apps. So rather than doing the $1,000 laptop, the VPN charge, the Citrix charge, and that end user impact, where you're telling a bunch of students, hey, you've got to use this Dell laptop. Well, the students these days want to use their own. And then we're going to lag you back. We're going to drag you back to a data center, and we're going to give you a desktop as a service just to access SaaS applications. Not a great user experience at all. Massive cost saving, as you could imagine there. And then not having to have the additional layered on technologies of DLP and web proxy and privileged access. It's actually 6 areas if you count the laptops, Gavin, as well. And you can see there how you can get a couple of $1,000 cost savings per person.
That's fantastic. That's actually quite. I mean, that's a really quite interesting use case. That student access or BYOD access to those 2 mission critical apps, which is certainly when you've got a wide range of people wanting to access those. Okay, so just in terms of how a customer would get from coming up with those potential use cases to getting to a kind of proof of value stage, how quickly can that be done with Island?
I'm smiling, Matt. I'll let you answer the question, but my initial reaction is we've started POVs at trade shows.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, Gavin, you know some of my background with some of the other vendors that I've worked at, and POVs have been quite an extensive process.
Yeah.
This isn't the case at Island. We are literally it's an hour call. Get you set up, spin you up a tenant, start delivering a few basic policies, and we've had enterprise-wide projects from meeting one through to having Island out on the shop floors inside of 90 days. Incredible. Matt, do you want to add anything to that from a technical?
Yeah, I think our advantage is that from an architecture perspective, we are just the browser. We have a SaaS-based management platform, so it's really simple to get a customer up and running. There is no dependency to have those traditional appliances deployed or standing up complicated infrastructure, and that's why we can deliver POVs very quickly and get that value proven out. As Ash said, almost within a matter of weeks to some degree. It's very low commit on the customer side. We're not replacing the other browsers. We're not trying to, remove the existence of the other browsers. It's seeing an additional browser in that environment to access those critical applications. So again, very quick, very straightforward. We've got an intuitive platform, so it's easy for customers to get up and running. Even without the assistance of Island in some situations. So that's the usual flow of the POVs that we've experienced.
Oh, fantastic. That's really, really useful. Thank you very much for that. So we're actually pretty much out of time, which is good. I'm sure our marketing team will be pleased. We're running to schedule. But thank you very much for your time today, Ash and Matt. It's been really useful. And I am genuinely excited about this technology. It's a technology that we've never seen before in the marketplace. It's something that we think is going to be absolutely massive, and I think CyberLab and Island are going to do some great things together. So again, I'm really, really excited. If you've got any questions or you'd like to have some follow-up information, we've got some information about Island on our website, cyberlab.co.uk, as well as Island's website. If there's anything you'd like to discuss, please feel free to reach out to your account manager, and our account managers will be in touch with you the day after the call. And thank you very much for joining us on the webinar today. It's really appreciated. And goodbye.